Hello and welcome to the Dentrepreneur Show. Welcome to Dentrepreneur podcast. This is Dr. D. Todd Russell, and today's guest is Chris Vandiford. Chris is a longtime friend of mine, owner, founder of Transition One Dental. He is an expert in the field of dental practice transitions, buy, sell, associates, metrics to run your practice, et cetera, et cetera. Longtime friend of mine. Chris, welcome to the show.
Todd, good to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Always. Just for future reference, this isn't the only time that Chris is going to be on here. He's actually already done one other short one with me, and there are so many topics to talk about in the dental space, and more and more, the market, Chris, as you know, is getting hotter and hotter for consolidation of dental practices, a larger number of students graduating now that some more dental schools have opened up. So there's a lot we can talk about.
You know, every time we talk, we think we're going to speak about one topic, and there's about 6 that we can navigate. So I'm excited to talk to you about whichever topic that is. But to me, I'm passionate about this because I think with the right information, a lot of people on your podcast will benefit.
And, you know, Chris, the tangents we're going to go down, it's my job as the host to keep us away from those. I am the king of tangents.
Yeah, right.
The challenge really is on myself, for myself. Nonetheless, just give me a quick bio, Chris. I know you've been doing this for 20 plus years now, which makes you, I think you said you're now the same age as those old guys.
Yes, I am. It's a great segue. Moved up here from the South. I'm a Southern boy that has been converted to a Midwestern family. My wife and I moved up here to start this business, and turned out to be the best decision we ever made. I love what I do, but it took a long time to become good at it, like a dentist or any business person. And do a lot of seminars, do a lot of speaking engagements, and actually one-on-ones with people to help them navigate this new career or how to navigate out of it.
So the gist of today is going to be talking about planning for your exit. And our big question today, and we've kind of alluded to it prior on a little intro podcast that we did, is when do you actually start thinking about an exit? Well, before I go into that, let's tangent on something that you just said there, Chris. And that is relationships, networking. I've seen you live and in person at conferences, you know, out there on the vendor floor, and how everybody is a warm handshake and a hug and a back slap. And, you know, I've seen you at the restaurant afterwards, and just like a dentist who becomes the guy or the girl in a town, in a neighborhood, it's all based on the relationships. They trust you because you have shown that warmth, that welcoming energy that you bring every time. So
I believe that people buy people, and warmth and energy and enthusiasm is currency. People are attracted to it.
Culture, right?
It is.
I've learned more in the last 10 years about culture than ever before, and how important it is. What is it? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. But here we are on a show talking about strategy. Although we're going to have some cultural conversations down the road.
You know, the audience doesn't know this, but I call you the Tony Robbins of dentistry. You've got the highest energy level. And every time I'm around you, you know, my frown turns upside down. So we're going to be smiling the whole time.
Awesome. All right. Well, let me go right into that leading question. We briefly talked about it earlier, but at what point in your career, you're a dentist, you're a small business owner, you're a medical professional, maybe a chiropractor, audiologist, all of those belong in this same spectrum. When do you actually start thinking about an exit?
You know, that's a great question. Each practice, as I've learned over time, each practice is different. Each dentist is different. Their needs are different. But I would hope that everyone would understand that they weren't born a dentist. The practice is a vehicle to get you to your goal. You're not going to be working till 70, 75, 80 unless you want to, because most people are using this medium to get to a point in their life where they say, I'd rather spend time with family, travel. So when is that right time to begin that exit strategy? When a dentist says he has 5 more years, I smile every time. Doc, you are in that perfect window. We need to know what you're worth. Every smart businessman knows what they're worth. And then we need to make sure that your value, you know how your value is affected over the next few years by certain metrics in the office, certain turn on one spigot, turn on another, how that affects your value. And then we also need to talk about what amount of time do you support a buyer to maximize your sale and to hand it off successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of is the segue to a great next question. I'm going to give you my opinion. 5 years before you want to retire, I think is one thing. I think it starts earlier, Chris. I really think I've been talking about the an article I wrote, Dear 35-Year-Old Self. I really think that my colleagues in particular need to start thinking way before that. And at 35, you got practice debt. You may have just bought the practice. You've got mortgage. You've got kids. You maybe think about private schools, and all that seems great. But when we're talking about an exit, we're talking about dollars, and we're not just talking about the 401k. But a big component of that is, who are you going to sell to? What's the culture of your staff like? Are they expecting it? So many of my colleagues don't tell their staff until the 11th hour of a deal.
Right.
I'm in total disagreement with that.
Me too.
But it happens. Nonetheless, as far as someone who's looking to sell or to exit, are there areas that they need to know that they don't know about before they go to market? Or is there something that a couple of ticks that might be they don't know? Here, this doc says I'm 55, 58. I want to retire in 5 years, Chris. What do they need to know?
Well, first of all, a common analogy, let's look under the hood of the car and see what you've got. Maybe we'll have 10 options. Maybe we'll have one. You need to know that. So let's discuss all these different metrics and trends and cash flows and staff and building and rents and landlords. Let's discuss it all and see how many options you have. Most dentists go blindly into it going, well, I'm just going to sell. It's not that easy. What do you have to offer for a buyer to come in and allow you to exit successfully? And how you present it is everything. How you tee it up. So your job and my job, Todd, is to educate them on the negatives, the red flags of their practice, because I've never seen a perfect practice. Have you?
No.
They don't exist.
Nope.
They're not perfect. And so we need to understand where the flaws are, where the warts on the frog are, and identify it and have a solution for it. Because if we don't, when you go to sell, that becomes the risk to the buyer that creates a negotiation.
When I'm when I'm looking at a practice or talking to a doc or a client that wants to, prepare for selling but certainly isn't ready, and tell them there's two things that they can do. Pick the top 10 things that you would want to make an ideal sale. Someone came to you and you checked all 10 boxes right now, you could sell. Then scale it back and be prepared to only have 7 or 8, 70, 80% of them. Okay, so rank them. The other thing I tell them to do is, or you grid it out. You do a plus and a minus grid, right? And assign values. Well, this is my, and then add them up. Add up the pluses and the minuses. And you might find that if you assign values like not get $1 million from my practice, that's a negative. And is that if you don't get $1 million, this deal isn't happening, then that's worth 10 points, right? So go through and assign these pluses and minuses points based on whatever you arbitrate. 100 points is tops, 50 points, 10, doesn't matter. Just be consistent on both sides and add it up. And you're going to find out that numbers don't lie. They're going to tell you it's a good time to sell or not.
Well, here's the first question I start with every doc. Dr. Russell, God forbid, if you were driving to work today and you had a fender bender and you hurt your back or neck, can you afford to retire today financially? Let's just talk through that one, because how you answer determines which transition path we go down. There are some dentists who say, Chris, no, I can't. Okay. I cannot bring in a buyer because now you're the competitor to the buyer because you need income. So anybody who goes, hey, I want to sell and I want to work. Why? Well, I like to keep my hands wet. Why? Well, I need the income. Okay, doc. We're not ready to sell. We need to put you in a position to where financially you become less likely to control or compete for patients and you're ready to support the buyer. Let's talk about that path now. So how they answer that question determines where we go.
Okay. So they answer that question and they're financially sound. They're 5 years away just because, it's that time in their lives. Kids are grown, out of the house, but the income's nice, but I won't, in 3 years, I won't need it. So in 5 years, I definitely won't. I'm at that point.
Right.
Who's on your team? Who are you bringing in now? You're my age. I'm 55. I'm going to retire at, this. 59 and a half is my bogey, right? That's the arbitrary bogey determined by the time in which you can withdraw without penalty from your retirement plans, right?
Yes.
So I circled that number and I said, that's when I want the luxury of retiring. So here I am. I'm 54 and a half and I've got 5 years. Who's on my team, Chris? Who am I?
Well, certainly what we want to do then is put this 5-year plan into place. Let's start with that first and say, okay, the most successful transitions are the ones where you're supporting post-sale for a period of time. Right. Where transitions fail, if I look over 24 years, where the rocky road was or the failure or even just the tensions, when the dentist goes, listen, I'm out. Good luck. Here's the keys. I'm out. That never goes well. When the dentist stays 2 or 3 years, it may not be perfect, but the handoff usually happens very, very smoothly and clean. So, doc, you've got 5 years. In the next 2 years, we need to prepare for that switch, which means we're starting now. It may take a year or two to find that shooting star or unicorn, especially in a small town. So we certainly want to make sure that your CPA has structured your documents correctly. Now, I know no dentist reports more to the government than he has to. I understand that. But the tax return is the source document that gets the loan approved. Even though P&Ls help, the tax return is that document. Doc, I see you made $1.8 million last year, but you're showing minus 147 in net income. We've got to work on that. We've got to show income now on the tax return. That is an actual example of a dentist. It took 4 years to sell his practice because no bank would lend money to what he wanted.
Right.
You've seen this. You've seen it. We got to make sure the documents are structured correctly. Number 2, how's your staff?
Let me interject there. It is the beauty of being a small business owner to be able to play some games and try to realize,
of course,
unfortunately, politics aside, we can argue that the current tax laws allow for it. And so we're all trying to get as much as we can for as little tax penalty.
Understood.
But when it comes to selling your practice and then you start dealing with the great evil of banks, it's got to be clean.
Has to.
And banks start looking at trailing 3 years.
Yes.
Right? So,
yes.
Okay. Now continue.
But if anybody on this podcast, if they gain just from this conversation, clean your documents as much as possible to show as much cash flow as possible, because the cash flow gets you to your ask price. It gets the loan approved. Here's what happens when you have minimal cash flow. Now you're probably going to be asked for a seller note. I'm sorry, doc. Your financials gave us this seller note. Now in the seller note, your good friend golfing buddy is going to punitive and lawyer up the seller note. So if the buyer makes one small default, it goes nuclear. It will not get signed. The deal will fail. And all because we created a situation to where we took the seller note and made the language so damaging and punitive as possible. And I just think to myself, doc, we could have avoided all of this had we had clean from the beginning. So that's number 1. That's important. Number one. Number two, put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. When the buyer walks in, are you digital? Oh, you need to replace all your computers? You don't have a pan?
Right.
I see.
CBCT anymore. Everybody wants 3D imaging. I mean, and to your point, Chris, on this, the young graduates, they've done a residency, they've spent some time in the large DSO world, they've got a little experience.
Oh my gosh.
They're out looking. All they know is technology.
Yes.
They don't know. And I'm sorry, but if you have a belt and pedal high speed, it's not going to work. And actually, it's probably got value as an antique.
Yes.
Doesn't have value in the hands of a dentist.
So doctor, let's address these red flags now. You want $1 million for your practice. Let's make sure the cash flow on your documents support that million. Let's also make sure that we don't have 100 to 200,000 in hard negotiation because your equipment is so outdated. Dr. Russell has to come in and go, I'm sorry, doc. I can't wait to do this to you, but I've got to put $250,000 into this. We really need a more balanced price. Happens all the time. That's an important discussion because a lot of expectations are false bars are created. I have sellers that tell me all the time, they clutch this appraisal they were given. They paid 10 grand for it. This 30-page document, they're clutching it. They're going, hey, it says 1.1 million on that. That's what I'm getting. Well, doctor, that's just a report. Let's discuss what the market and the reality of today's business is.
I told docs, it's like everybody pretty much knows how to buy and sell a house, right? And you sell a house and you ask her, you're a buyer of a house, you get an inspection. And so the inspector comes along and says, this HVAC system, that's number one, right, is 20 years old and it's outdated. It's going to be replaced. The roof, I was up on the roof and there's multiple missing shingles. It's a 20-year-old roof and it's failing. And then there's the third thing is usually either the exterior of the house or the basement, wet basement, all of that kind of bundled into one. So those three things, right? So you love the house. You love the structure of it. You love the color of it. You love everything about it. It speaks to you. But all three of those things are 25 years old and all need something. Asking price? Are you offering asking price? No. The bank's not going to support asking price because it's going to see that you got to put $100,000 into this thing. And if you're taking out a loan and you've already got a ton of student loan debt, the bank's not going to support the buy of that practice or seller doctor. No student young dentist is going to be able to buy it because of this.
Correct.
Same scenario.
Correct. So you said, who's on my team? Really, it's important to understand if you surround yourself with advisors that say, hey, you're going to get top dollar for your practice. I find that a seller will have an attorney who's an old golfing buddy or a family member. That's dangerous because they're very one-sided. Well, this practice has so much potential, Todd. So really what your team should be, you should have a very good broker on your team or advisor who's advising you will maximize your gain, but we have to do it in a way that's win-win for both parties. If you want to negotiate from $1.1 million down to 900, which will happen, you're going to sour the relationship. And by the time you get to the 1 yard line, everybody's angry.
Yep.
Why didn't we just start at 900 and put it in a path where everyone's popping champagne on the 1 yard line? That's all in creating realistic expectations right from the beginning. So I think your team needs to be those that give you a realistic snapshot. Trust me, we'll maximize your value, but the buyer's going to win too. And any relationship where the buyer loses is not a good transmission.
Yep. I like to think that without question, it's the accountant. And there's some great tax preparers out there, but you need to have an accountant that understands valuation, that has been part of transactions before.
Yes, agree.
Transactions. You need to have an attorney, like you said, your golfing buddy, that's fine. but you also need to have an attorney that's familiar with mergers and acquisitions.
Dental specific.
I mean, the multi-billion-dollar acquisitions, I mean, certainly that would be a wonderful person to have on your team, but they're also expensive. But someone who has done either dental practices or small businesses. And then finally, it's the broker, the consultant, the strategist. That's what I am, and that's what I'm putting myself out there for doctors who are, like you said, and we've worked together with people who are looking to sell. They just don't know who they're going to sell to just yet. And so we can help prepare them for that and get them in front of those right people. It doesn't mean that the person that you're working with already, your accountant or attorney, isn't the right person, but we should vet them a little bit and just make certain that they are.
Well, I mean, Todd, someone would hire you as a strategist, and I'd hope they would realize how integral you are to the success of the communication. So, for example, I have seen deals, I have one right now, where it's a $2.5 million acquisition and sale. And I have two attorneys that are hung up on the employment agreement. Guess what we're doing? The buyer, the seller, and I are meeting at a Panera. We're going to spend 45 minutes, and we will solve in 45 minutes what two attorneys have not solved in 2 months. We're going on 2 months. And then
an hourly rate times 2, right? And their job is to cover the bases on your dime.
Yes. That's your role. That's my role. Let's bring us together and communicate. And I cannot tell you if you have a relationship where the buyer and seller, when I have a seller who calls me and goes, that Todd Russell, I want to adopt him. That guy is fantastic. Guess what? The buyer did the right thing by taking the seller out to dinner, by getting to know the family, and now we have an avenue for compromise. When there's factions, so any seller listening to this or any buyer, when you have factions, will your side stay over there, my side stay over there, you're typically going to find a path for failure rather than compromise.
Chris, I'm just looking out of the corner of my eye at the list of
we're just getting started, right?
One of the things on my podcast, Chris, I try to keep us under 30 minutes.
I know.
Talk about this. We want quick hits, and there's more to come. It allows for more content. One of the things you'll find about me, and Chris, you know this, is one of my company core values is transparency. So you're seeing some of it now. That's how my podcast is going to be run. I'm going to say some colorful things down the road with my guests. And in the future, not only are we going to talk about the entrepreneurship of running a dental practice and exit strategies and valuations and contracts, just like you talked about, employment agreements with doctors. I'm going to have some colorful people on here, Chris, who used to be the pro hockey team dentist for 20 years. And so a couple of my guests, we're going to light up the sports world and talk about what happened behind closed doors, of course, redacting the names to some degree.
Of course.
But I look forward to it. And I think what's going to happen is, we discussed earlier, the tangents that we go off on.
Yes.
Even better than the actual agenda we started. And here we are approaching 30 minutes. And I made a couple of notes just now on some stuff that you said that I didn't really think about in all the years I've been doing this. So, wow.
That's exciting.
What a conversation.
That's exciting.
Instead. So, Chris, I'm going to obviously have you back time and time again.
Please. I think we're just getting warmed up.
I know we can go on and on. In fact, you and I actually started doing these on, and this is a plug for Dave Kittle, the Dave Kittle Show.
Mm-hmm.
He's on Spotify, Apple podcasts, as well as YouTube. Dave Kittle is a friend of yours who has a bunch of physical therapy centers.
Yes.
And so a concept similar to mine, a roll up of X numbers, but he started a podcast, and highly recommend it to my audience. Pick up the Dave Kittle Show and listen to Dave, a unique guy. Chris and I are going to be doing another podcast, all three of us together again.
Live.
Similar conversations, maybe a little bit different. You never know where Dave's going to take us. Well, Chris, I want to thank you again for being on here. Again, please tell my audience how and where you can be reached at, my friend.
You can find me on transition1.net, my website. Email me at chris@transition1.net, and call my cell, 937-206-2913. People are surprised, but I always pick it up. So look forward to the call.
Thanks for being on the Dentipreneur Show here, Chris. I really appreciate it. I'm Dr. D. Todd Russell. I can also be reached on my website, dentipreneurllc.com. My email is dtoddrussell@gmail.com, and my cell 216-410-1331. Would love to hear from you in any way, shape, or form. I do offer a strategic planning segment that I can sit down and talk to you about. I love working in the dental space. My resume shows that I've done a lot over the years, in everything from a resident to almost retirement. And I say almost. I'm not there yet.
No.
All right, Mr. Vandiford, have a wonderful day, and I appreciate your time, my friend.
Great to be with you, Todd. Thanks for the invite.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. Please follow or subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. If you would like further information or to meet with me one-on-one and discuss your practice, please feel free to contact me through my website, dentipreneurllc.com. Many more exciting guests and topics are headed your way.